So let's talk about what happens when a tradition that's thousands of years old runs smack into modern American bureaucracy. We're diving into a cultural beverage that just got a really big and, frankly, long overdue update from the US government. Okay, I want to start with a question for you. Can you think of a 3,000-year-old beverage, a total cultural staple in the Pacific Islands, that just got a major official clarification from the US government? Any ideas? Well, the answer is Kava. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, has officially confirmed that kava is a conventional food. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds like some dry regulatory news. But trust me, this is a huge deal for a drink with such a deep history, and it finally provides some much-needed clarity. To really get why this FDA confirmation is so important, we first have to understand kava itself. What is it and where does it even come from? So, what exactly is kava? Well, in the simplest terms, it's a beverage made from the root of the kava plant. But honestly, it's so much more than that. For centuries, in places like Hawaii, Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga, it's been at the very heart of social life. It's how people connect, show respect, and build community. And we are not talking about some new trend here. This isn't the latest wellness fad you saw online. Kava has been a part of cultural life for over 3,000 years. Think about that. This is a living tradition with an incredibly deep history. And this tradition is absolutely alive and well today. You can hear it in the words of Gilbert Galahar, who says, "Kava shaped how I learned connection and respect. In the circle, every voice matters." That just says it all, right? It shows how kava is really about creating this space where people can talk and listen to each other. Okay, so you've got this 3,000-year-old drink. How on earth does it fit into modern U.S. food law? Well, it turns out it all comes down to a rule from way back in the 1950s. So, back in 1958, Congress passed something called the Food Additives Amendment. Basically, it created a dividing line. It said that any new food ingredient had to get the FDA's approval before it could be sold. But, and this is the really important part, foods that had a long history of being used before 1958 were grandfathered in. They were just considered ordinary food. So, you really have two different buckets. In one, you've got traditional foods like kava or even matcha. They've been around for ages, so they don't need pre-market approval. In the other bucket, you've got new food additives, like imagine a brand new sweetener someone just invented. That needs the FDA's green light. And since kava was a part of life in places like Hawaii and American Samoa long before 1958, it fits right into that traditional food category. And that brings us to the official word from the FDA itself. Kava tea can be considered as a food. The key thing to understand here is that this isn't a new approval. It's just the FDA finally clarifying an existing rule and formally recognizing kava's rightful place in the American food scene. Okay, so if kava has this incredibly long and safe history, you might be wondering about some of the scary stuff you've seen online. Let's just tackle that head on and clear up some of the confusion. Right. Let's be real. If you Google kava, you are almost guaranteed to find some pretty alarming claims about liver damage. It's a huge point of confusion, so where did all that come from? This story actually starts in the early 2000s. There was a single pharmaceutical product in Germany that was marketed with the word kava on it. This product got linked to some health issues, and it was eventually pulled from the market. But, and I can't stress this enough, it was not the traditional kava beverage that people have been drinking safely for thousands of years. Here's a perfect way to think about it. Let's say a company made a weird pill using some kind of green tea extract, and that pill got recalled. Would it make any sense to then say that matcha, the traditional Japanese green tea, is now unsafe? Of course not. It's the exact same logic with kava. And modern science totally backs this up. Kava scientist Ed Johnston says that when you look at all the research we have now, traditional kava is actually one of the safest plant foods we study, closer to a superfood than a risk. The science has caught up, and it's cleared up those old concerns. So, the FDA has clarified kava's status. It's a food. But what does that actually mean in the real world? Why does this matter, and who does it really affect? Well, this clarity creates this huge positive ripple effect. For policymakers and health inspectors, it finally gives them a clear rulebook to work with. For all the small businesses out there like kava bars and cafes, it means they can operate without this constant uncertainty. And maybe most importantly, for Pacific Island communities, it's a huge validation of their cultural heritage. And you can really feel just how personal this is when you hear from Tuni Raphael, a Kava bar owner. She says, I feel a deep sense of comfort knowing that our traditions are protected and respected. You see, this isn't just about some legal footnote. This is about cultural recognition. It's about dignity. Ultimately, the story of kava is a perfect example of how an ancient cultural food can find its rightful place inside a modern system. And it leaves us with a bigger question to chew on. As our world gets more and more connected, what other cultural foods out there, with their own rich histories, deserve a closer look and a bit more understanding? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.